For more on what next week's trial might actually look like, we are joined once again here on Inside the Issues by Representative Schiff, who is the representative for California's 28th District. Adam Schiff, welcome back to Inside the Issues.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
You are not reprising your role this time around as an impeachment manager. We do have two Californians, of course, Ted Lieu and Eric Swalwell. I'm just curious, what is this? Is this a relief for you that you don't have to take on? It's a huge responsibility. Is it a disappointment? Maybe a little bit of both.
I think the Speaker made a wise decision. She picked a brand new team of managers. This is not a sequel to the last trial. It's a brand new, different, and even more egregious presidential abuse that warrants his disqualification from ever holding office again. So I think it makes sense to have a new group of managers making the presentation. And the Speaker chose a great lead manager, Jamie Raskin, a very dear friend of mine. And I know they will make a very powerful case. The brief they filed really lays it all out. The history of the president's misconduct leading up to that January 6th insurrection. You get to see just all the actions he took before then, during, after, that make him so dangerous to this country, and the responsibility to disqualify him from ever holding office again so important to our future security.
I have to say, the phrase that kind of took me by surprise was that he was singularly responsible, and they also talked in making their case about his words propelled these extremists like a cannonball towards the Capitol building. And those are very strong, persuasive words, but I'm wondering if it leaves any opening for his defense team to say, no, it was not him who was singularly responsible. Have you talked to your colleagues there, as you mentioned, Jamie Raskin and the other impeachment managers, given them any advice based on your very real practical experience in this world?
What I've done is serve as a resource for Jamie, for the team, when they have issues come up or questions to reach out to me. They're a very capable group, though, and I certainly don't want to be, backseat driving. So I'm a resource. Look, I think that the president, for well or for ill, is in a unique position. He has the strongest bully pulpit in the country. He helped to assemble that mob on the Mall, and his remarks, his agitation, his incitement led that mob to attack the Capitol. That was the clearly foreseeable consequence of what he did and said. And not just on that day. One of the things that the House managers have laid out so beautifully in that brief is the whole course of conduct leading up to Election Day. All of the lies the president told about what would happen on Election Day, all the lies he told about the election being stolen and rigged, all of the incitement took place well before that day, really culminated in that day. But that day that he picked for that rally wasn't picked by accident. It was the final step in the transfer of power. That is the ascertainment of those electors, the counting of those ballots in the joint session. The president knew unless he could interrupt that, stop that, he was going to fail in this effort to perpetuate himself in power. And so I think the managers have accurately described his singular role.
And of course, because you are not having to devote so much of your time to the Senate trial, you have been very hard at work with the other huge challenge that is facing our nation right now, and certainly our region, and that is the COVID pandemic. You and some of your colleagues have been calling on President Biden to increase the manufacture and the distribution of higher quality face coverings. I'm curious, it feels to me like so much of our focus right now is on vaccine distribution. Is there some concern that maybe in the midst of all of this, we're really losing sight of some very basic but incredibly important precautionary measures?
I think that's absolutely right. And from the very beginning of this pandemic, we knew the importance of wearing a mask. And the more that we studied the virus, the more we understood just how important it is. But we also learned a lot about what masks are effective, what are the most effective. And those N95 or the more commercially available KN95 masks are really very effective and more effective than some of the other alternatives that are out there. And I think people have had to go online and try to search out and find out for themselves, should I be wearing two masks now? There are stories, maybe two masks are better than one. It would be very helpful, in my view, if the CDC, the FDA, did a public education campaign about why masks are effective and which masks are the most effective and how to get a hold of them. And if they can't afford them, make them available. So you could just ask your letter carrier, and your letter carrier would have provided by the federal government a box of the very best. It may be as effective a tool as the vaccines. It's readily available to everyone, and we need to make maximum use of it.
I wish that supply were our only issue, but as you well know, a big problem here is a real resistance to it. Those people, especially, and they're here in Southern California, who see this as an infringement on their personal freedoms. I mean, I heard a stunning fact the other day that if everyone were wearing masks and wearing them correctly, we could have COVID knocked out in 4 weeks. I mean, just 4 weeks. How do we go about in this very charged partisan moment? How do we get the science out there in a better way? How do we sway minds of those who might think masks aren't worthwhile or are somehow taking away their freedoms?
Oh, you know, you're absolutely right. When you look at other countries that have a higher degree of wearing masks, their deaths have been in the hundreds or low thousands. They haven't had the kind of devastation that we have with hundreds of thousands of casualties. And the uniformity of wearing masks has been a great benefit in these other countries. We need to get past masks being some kind of a partisan issue. It's not. The virus doesn't discriminate. It infects Democrats and Republicans alike. And, you know, yes, people have personal freedom. I'm all for the maximum amount of personal freedom. But at the same time, people have the freedom to continue to live their lives without being threatened by other people who are putting them at risk. You know, if it were just a question of whether they were taking the risk themselves by wearing a mask, it would be one thing, but it's not. Someone not wearing a mask that goes into a store or goes onto mass transit or in the halls of Congress, and I have a hard time sometimes with my Republican colleagues to get them to wear a mask. It's not that they're just exercising their personal freedom. They're putting a risk with other people's freedom, the freedom to live, the freedom to be healthy. And so we need to all demonstrate responsibility along with that personal freedom.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate it.